US Secretary of State said Sunday's Ukraine peace talks have been the most productive in the past 10 months.
Israel says it killed Hezbollah's chief of staff in its airstrikes in the Lebanese capital Beirut on Sunday as international condemnations pour in.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said today was the most productive day they have had in the past 10 months. However, no agreement has yet been reached. The statement came after Sunday's peace talks with top Kyiv officials on ending the war in Ukraine. Rubio said they hope to have a proposal soon, but no deadline has been set.
I think the takeaway from it is, I think this was a very, very meaningful, I would say probably best meeting and day we've had so far in this entire process, going back to when we first came into office in January. But there's still some work left to do, and that's what our teams are going to be doing right now.
Rubio noted that any final product, once ready, will still have to be presented to Moscow. Trump's 28-point peace plan has been criticized by Western allies who say it favors Moscow. Meanwhile, on the ground, Ukraine's Special Operation Forces carried out a series of drone strikes on Russian positions in the Donetsk region, as Russian attacks have killed at least 6 people over the past 24 hours.
Israel says that its military killed Hezbollah's top military official, Haytham Dabtabai, in an attack in Beirut. Local authorities reported that the attack in the southern suburbs of the Lebanese capital killed 5 people and wounded 28 others. It was the first Israeli strike in Beirut since June. In a statement, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said Israel would, quote, continue to act forcefully to prevent any threat to the residents of the north and the state of Israel. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun condemned Sunday's attack and accused Israel of refusing to implement its end of the ceasefire agreement. Dabtabai had led Hezbollah's elite Radwan unit. He had been the apparent successor to Ibrahim Akil, who was killed in September last year in Israeli attacks that wiped out much of Hezbollah's senior leadership.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa declared the G20 summit in Johannesburg closed on Sunday with a glaring absence of the United States, the next country to lead the bloc after the Trump administration boycotted the 2-day talks.
To the next president of the G20, which is the United States.
Banging a wooden gavel on a block like a judge would in a G20 tradition, Ramaphosa was to hand over to the leader of the country to hold the rotating presidency, but no U.S. official was there to receive it. The White House said it had made a last-minute decision for an official from its embassy in South Africa to attend the G20 handover, but South Africa refused that, saying it was an insult for Ramaphosa to hand over to a junior embassy official. In the end, no U.S. delegation was accredited for the summit. The G20, the first to be held in Africa, broke with tradition by issuing a leader's declaration on the opening day of the talks, when declarations usually come at the end of the summit.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has suggested that the former Prince Andrew should testify before a US congressional committee investigating convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Starmer declined to comment specifically about King Charles' disgraced younger brother, but told reporters that he believes as a general principle, people should provide evidence to investigators. The comments were made to reporters traveling with him as he flew to Johannesburg in South Africa to participate in the Group of 20 or G20 summit. The former prince, now known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, has so far ignored a request from lawmakers in the U.S. House of Representatives Oversight Committee to testify about his, quote, long-standing friendship with Epstein. The disgraced UK royal was accused by Virginia Joffrey, an Epstein victim, of sexual assault at one of the lavish parties the former financier organized on his Little St. James private island. She said she was forced by Epstein and his accomplice and longtime partner Ghislaine Maxwell to perform sexual acts on Andrew against her will while at the time only being 17 years old. Pressure is continuing to mount on the former royal, who was stripped of his title and duties last month as the royal family tried to insulate itself from criticism about his relationship with Epstein.
China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi said Japan crossed a red line after its new Prime Minister, Sanai Takaichi, made comments about a potential military intervention over Taiwan. The Japanese leader claimed that China's naval blockade or other action against Taiwan could be grounds for a Japanese military response. Wang slammed the statement as reckless and said China must respond to Japan's actions. Takaichi's remarks have led to rising tensions between the two countries over the past few weeks. Beijing considers the self-ruled Taiwan as its own territory. It has objected to the involvement of other countries in Taiwan, notably the United States and its allies in Asia, which includes Japan. Takaichi's stance is seen as more forceful than previous prime ministers who have expressed concern over China's threat to Taiwan but haven't publicly said how Japan would respond.
Theia, we believe, is an ancient planet that smashed into the Earth about 4.5 billion years ago. It was probably around the size of Mars, and when it smashed into the Earth, it essentially demolished itself. It kicked up a lot of debris into space, along with some of the Earth, and over time, that debris coalesced together to form the Moon. The only remnants we have are bits of rock that are embedded within the Earth and also that make up the Moon. So by studying those rocks and their chemical signatures, we can begin to paint a picture of where Theia came from. What we tend to find is that objects in different parts of the solar system will share similar isotope ratios. So if you can determine Theia's own isotope ratios, you can determine where it came from. One of the things about this research that does make it so exciting is not only is it helping to paint a picture of what happened to the Earth 4.5 billion years ago, but also it's able to almost exactly pinpoint where this object came from. We're talking about a planet that doesn't exist anymore. Theia hasn't existed in 4.5 billion years. It was completely vaporized, essentially. And yet, with a good amount of precision, we can figure out where it came from.
South African-born artist Ralph Zeeman has spent his life fighting violence, not with weapons but with art. His monumental installations reinterpret military symbols to transform them into tools for dialogue and reflection.
Even as a young kid, I was very much aware of the injustice. I was brought up by my parents, but also very much by the African staff who worked at my house. To see the sheer brutality that the apartheid state brought down on black people to keep them in fear and suppressed really made an impression on me.
Weapons of Mass Production is a three-piece art project consisting of replicas of an AK-47 assault rifle, a Casper armored personal carrier, and an MiG-21 fighter jet. Each of these objects was covered with millions of glass beads, crafted by African artisans.
It was seen as a low craft. It was done by black people under apartheid. It was something that was sold to tourists and perceived as having very little value. I wanted to take those skills and those talents and turn it into modern contemporary art.
According to the artist, each part of the project symbolizes a different dimension of violence.
So the first was the AK-47. It dealt with gun violence. It dealt with the proliferation of weapons. The second in the series was the Casper. It was designed and built in South Africa in the 80s, and they sold them to repressive governments around the world. So thirdly, coming to the MiG-21, is the most mass-produced supersonic fighter jet of all time.
Zeeman believes that physical proximity to an object of war, transformed into an art piece, is an act of reclaiming power over violence. Each bead, hand-arranged by hundreds of artists, becomes a gesture of resistance against the militarization of the world.
The whole world is on a knife edge. I think it's good to have a counter-narrative to all of this. In a world that's increasingly dangerous, I think these are things we should be discussing.
The MiG-21 project has garnered significant media attention. Eventually, the aircraft will be sold, and all proceeds will go towards funding educational programs and art therapy.